Ready to hand over the encryption keys? Julian Harrington stood in my doorway, coffee in hand, a smug smirk plastered across his 26-year-old face. 3 weeks ago, he had been a junior developer who could not debug a simple API call without searching every step on the internet. Today, he was the lead architect of Vertex Neural Systems because his father, Richard Harrington, was the chief executive officer, and I was supposed to report to him now. I looked at Julian, looked at the office I had worked in for 14 years, and looked at the codebase I had written from the first line to the last. It was 64 million lines of proprietary artificial intelligence that powered a $7,500,000,000 company. Then I smiled. No, Julian, I am not here to hand over anything. His smirk flickered. I am here to initiate the kill switch. The color drained from his face. What kill switch? I turned to my keyboard, entered a sequence that only 3 people on Earth knew existed. The one your father should have asked about before he decided I was expendable. The screen flashed red. System override initiated. Authorization, Vance Nicholas, original architect. Proprietary code extraction in progress. Julian dropped his coffee, the paper cup spilling dark liquid across the pristine carpet, and somewhere upstairs, Richard Harrington's phone started ringing, with calls that would never stop. Before I explain how I dismantled a $7,500,000,000 empire line by line. If you appreciate stories about founders who refuse to be erased, and corporations that learn the cost of betrayal, hit that subscribe button and tap the like button right now. You need to witness what happened next. My name is Nicholas Vance. I was 48 years old when Richard Harrington decided his son deserved my life's work. 14 years earlier, I was a 34-year-old machine learning researcher with a doctorate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a stack of rejected grant applications, and an idea that the entire academic establishment called impossible. The idea was adaptive neural architecture. Artificial intelligence systems that could fundamentally restructure their own learning pathways in real time, mimicking the neuroplasticity of the human brain. Traditional artificial intelligence was static. You trained a model, deployed it, and it stayed frozen. My approach allowed artificial intelligence to continuously evolve, adapting to new data without retraining from scratch. Every professor I pitched dismissed it, theoretically interesting but computationally infeasible. The resource requirements would be astronomical. Maybe in 20 years, Dr. Vance. I did not have 20 years. I had a garage, a server I had built from salvaged components, and enough stubborn determination to prove them all wrong. For 4 years, I coded alone, slept 4 hours a night, survived on instant noodles and obsessive focus. By year 2, I had developed the core algorithm, what I called the NOVA framework, a mathematical structure that enabled dynamic neural reconfiguration with minimal computational overhead. It worked. Not just theoretically, it actually worked. I demonstrated the prototype to myself at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, watching my system learn and adapt in ways that should not have been possible, I cried. Then, I kept coding. By year 4, I had a functional platform, rudimentary but powerful, the foundation for everything that would follow. That was when Richard Harrington appeared. Richard was a venture capitalist who had made his fortune in enterprise software. He had heard about my work through a former colleague, who had finally acknowledged what I had built. Our first meeting was at a small, quiet coffee shop in Palo Alto. Richard was 54 then, silver-haired, charismatic, the kind of man who made you feel like the center of the universe when he focused his attention on you. Dr. Vance, what you have created is extraordinary, he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. Thank you, I replied. It is also completely unmarketable in its current form. I bristled. My pride stung. The technology speaks for itself. Technology does not speak, people do. And you need someone who can translate your brilliance into a language investors and customers understand. What are you proposing? Richard leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. A partnership. I provide the business infrastructure, capital, connections, and commercial strategy. You provide the technological vision. Together, we build something neither of us could build alone. And the ownership structure? 50-50. Equal partners. I will not pretend to understand your code, and you will not pretend to enjoy board meetings. We stay in our lanes. It sounded reasonable, too reasonable maybe. What is the catch? Richard smiled, a warm, disarming expression. The catch is that this will consume both our lives for the next decade. Building something from nothing always does. The question is whether you are willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to change the world. I thought about my cold garage, my cheap noodles, my 4 years of solitary obsession. I have already sacrificed everything, I told him. What is another decade? We shook hands. Vertex Neural Systems was born. The first 5 years of Vertex Neural Systems were exactly what Richard Harrington had promised: total and absolute consumption. We successfully raised $32 million in Series A funding, which allowed us to hire our first team of engineers and build out the Nova framework into a robust, commercial-grade platform. I worked 18-hour days regularly, writing code, reviewing every pull request, debugging complex integration issues, and documenting the entire architecture in obsessive detail. I created technical specifications that eventually ran to thousands of pages. Richard, true to his word, handled everything else. He managed investor relations, acquired our first major clients, and handled the endless board meetings and commercial negotiations that would have made my brain ache. The division of labor worked beautifully. By the 5th year, Vertex Neural Systems had grown to 270 employees, boasting $135 million in annual revenue. We had signed lucrative contracts with major companies who used our adaptive artificial intelligence for everything from financial fraud detection to global supply chain optimization. By the 8th year, we had expanded globally. We opened offices in London, Singapore, and Tokyo to handle the international demand. Our annual revenue exceeded $580 million, and our valuation was rapidly approaching $3 billion. By the 10th year, we decided it was time to go public. The initial public offering price was set at $62 per share. On opening day, our market capitalization reached $4,600 million. It was a massive success, a testament to what we had built from a garage. By the 14th year, Vertex Neural Systems was valued at $7,500 million. Despite our massive scale, I was still writing code. We had 480 engineers by then, organized into dozens of specialized teams, but the core architecture remained mine. The Nova framework that powered every single service we offered, the encryption protocols that protected our clients' highly sensitive data, and the proprietary algorithms that competitors spent hundreds of millions trying to replicate, all trace back to my keyboard. Every critical system in the company relied on my original mathematical structures. I believed I was irreplaceable. I believed that as long as the technology was mine, my position in the company was secure. It was a foolish assumption. Richard's son, Julian Harrington, joined Vertex Neural Systems during our 12th year. He was 26 then, fresh out of Stanford with a computer science degree. I later learned his admission had been secured through a very large donation from his father. He had no meaningful work experience, no demonstrated aptitude for artificial intelligence development, and no understanding of what it took to build a company from scratch. But he was Richard's son. Just find him a role, Richard had told me when he informed me of the hire. Something in product development, where he can learn the ropes and see how the business operates. I assigned Julian to a junior position in our implementation team, focusing on basic integration work and client-facing support. He was mediocre at best. His code was sloppy, full of basic errors, and his understanding of our neural architecture was superficial. Yet, he possessed the supreme confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life, combined with the professional competence of someone who had never actually needed to try. I documented his performance issues, provided detailed, written feedback, and tried to mentor him toward improvement. Nothing worked. Julian did not want to improve. He did not want to learn. He wanted to arrive. By his 6th month at the company, Julian was already complaining to his father about his limited role and lack of influence. By the 9th month, he was attending executive meetings he had not been invited to, offering opinions on technical matters he did not comprehend. By the 12th month, he was actively positioning himself as the heir apparent to a technical throne he had no hand in building. He began telling anyone who would listen that the company needed fresh technical vision. that my architecture was legacy, and that we needed to pivot. And Richard listened. The father could not see past his love for his son, or perhaps he simply wanted to secure his family's dynasty. The announcement came on a Thursday morning without any warning. It was a company-wide email with the subject line, Leadership Evolution. I remember the exact wording. As we prepare for the next phase of global growth, I am pleased to announce a restructuring of our technical leadership. Julian Harrington will assume the role of lead architect, overseeing all core platform development. Nicholas Vance will transition to a strategic advisory capacity, supporting Julian's vision for our technical future. I read the email 3 times, the words blurring before my eyes. Strategic advisory capacity. After 14 years of building every critical system in the company, I was being sidelined for a young man who could not explain our basic architecture without reading from a cheat sheet. I walked into Richard's office without knocking, my boots heavy on the hardwood floor. "Explain this," I demanded, slamming my hands on his desk. Richard looked up from his laptop, his expression the careful neutrality of a seasoned executive who had anticipated this confrontation. "Nicholas, please sit down," he said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite him. "I understand this is surprising." "Surprising?" I scoffed, pacing the room. "You are replacing me with your son. Your incompetent, unqualified son who cannot debug a memory leak without someone holding his hand." "I am not replacing you, Nicholas. I am evolving your role. You have been in the technical trenches for 14 years. It is time to step back, let new leadership take the wheel, and focus on the big picture." "New leadership?" "Julian cannot explain our basic database schema. Last week, he committed a faulty code merge that crashed our staging environment for 6 hours and corrupted 3 test databases. He is learning. You will help him learn." I stopped pacing and stared at Richard, the cold reality of the situation settling over me. "That is it not?" I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You want me to train him. You want me to transfer my 14 years of knowledge, make him appear competent to the board and the public, while I fade into the background." Richard's silence was confirmation enough. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes, and when he is ready, I continued, "When Julian can stand on his own, you will push me out entirely. You will offer me early retirement, a generous severance package, and write a nice press release about the founding genius stepping aside for fresh perspectives." "Nicholas, that is not how this has to go," Richard muttered. "It is exactly how this goes." I turned toward the door, my fist clenched. "This is not over, Richard." "Actually, it is," he said, his voice regaining its corporate authority. "The board approved the restructuring this morning. The paperwork is filed. It is done." I paused at the doorway, looking back over my shoulder. "You should have read our original partnership agreement more carefully." "What is the meaning of this?" Richard asked, a brief flicker of worry crossing his face. "You will find out very soon." I walked out of the building, the cool evening air doing little to soothe the anger burning in my chest. That night, in the quiet of my home office, I retrieved a document I had not looked at in 14 years. It was the original partnership agreement between Richard Harrington and Nicholas Vance. We had drafted it ourselves during those early, caffeinated coffee shop meetings, before expensive corporate lawyers got involved, before the company became valuable enough for anyone to care about the fine print. I flipped to the section on intellectual property provisions, which we had labeled Section 12. The words were clear and unambiguous. All proprietary code, algorithms, and technical architectures developed by either partner remain the individual intellectual property of the creating partner, licensed exclusively to Vertex Neural Systems for the duration of the partnership. Should either partner's role be materially diminished, without mutual written consent, the affected partner retains the right to revoke said license with 90 days written notice. I read those words 5 times, letting the legal implications sink in. The Nova framework, every line of foundational code, was mine. It was licensed to the company, not owned by it, and my role had just been materially diminished. According to paragraph 4 of Section 12, material diminution included reduction in title, removal from technical decision-making authority, or subordination to personnel with less seniority or expertise. All 3 criteria had been met. I called my attorney at 11 o'clock that night. Evelyn Cole had handled my personal legal matters and corporate contracts since Vertex Neural's Series B funding. She was brilliant, meticulous, and possessed a sharp legal mind that saw through corporate smoke and mirrors. "Nicholas, what is happening?" she asked, her voice alert despite the late hour. "They are pushing me out, Evelyn," I said. "Richard promoted his son to lead architect and demoted me to an advisory capacity." "Did the board approve this?" "Yes, he claims they did this morning. But Evelyn, I have our original partnership agreement, specifically Section 12. There was a long silence on the other end of the line as I heard the rustle of papers. "The intellectual property clause," Evelyn finally said. "I remember reviewing those provisions. Does it hold up?" "Evelyn, that agreement was signed before Vertex Neural was formally incorporated, before the initial public offering, and before any of the subsequent corporate restructuring." My heart sank, preparing for the worst. "So it is worthless?" I asked. "I did not say that," Evelyn replied. "The original partnership agreement was never formally superseded or terminated by any subsequent contract. It was rolled into the corporate structure, but the intellectual property provisions were never explicitly voided." "What does that mean for us?" "It means we have an argument, a very strong one. Your foundational code was licensed, not transferred. The company has been operating under that license for 14 years. If the license is revocable, then you have the legal right to revoke it." Evelyn Cole paused, letting her words hang in the air. "Nicholas, the practical implications of actually executing this would be catastrophic," she warned, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me through her glasses. "You are talking about pulling the foundational architecture from a $7,500,000,000 public company. The legal battle would be colossal, a multi-year war that would consume your life, your energy, and all your resources. The courts might take months just to issue a preliminary ruling." "I do not want a legal battle, Evelyn. I want leverage." "Leverage for what?" I thought about it, about Richard's betrayal, about Julian's smug face, and about the 14 years of sleepless nights I had poured into Vertex Neural Systems. I spent my youth building this technology while Richard sat in comfortable boardrooms. I want leverage to take back what is mine. I had 90 days before my strategic advisory role officially began. 90 days to prepare my strategy and compile the necessary documentation. First, I meticulously documented every single foundational system I had built from scratch. I cataloged every proprietary algorithm, every mathematical formula, and every block of code that traced back to my original garage setup. The Nova framework, the adaptive learning protocols, the encryption architecture, and the neural pathway optimization systems. In total, 64 million lines of code, roughly 74.5% of Vertex Neural's entire codebase, originated directly from my keyboard. Without my contributions, the platform would not just stumble, it would collapse instantly. The interconnections were too deep, the dependencies too fundamental. If you pulled my threads, the entire corporate tapestry would unravel. I created a secure offline server containing all the technical logs, repository histories, and code signatures to prove my authorship beyond any legal doubt. Second, I identified key allies within the company. Not everyone at Vertex Neural Systems was loyal to Richard. Many of our veteran engineers had watched Julian's sudden promotion with growing frustration and alarm. Several key executives openly questioned whether such blatant nepotism was a wise strategy for a public company answerable to shareholders. I had quiet, off-site lunches in local diners, gauged their loyalties, and built a tight network of professionals who agreed to support me when the moment came. They understood that the company's survival depended on technical excellence, not family names. I assured them that their jobs would be safe and that I had a plan to rescue the technology we all believed in. Third, I prepared the code extraction system. This was not a malicious self-destruct mechanism, as that would be highly illegal and land me in federal prison. Instead, it was an elegant, proprietary extraction utility built into the architecture from day one. I had originally designed it as a failsafe in case Vertex Neural was ever acquired by a hostile competitor that might misuse the technology. The utility could identify, isolate, and tag every line of code I had authored, preparing it for clean removal without affecting any auxiliary code written by others. It would simply reclaim my intellectual property. Without my code, Vertex Neural Systems would be nothing but an empty shell, a brand name with no actual product. By day 87 of my 90-day notice period, Julian had been acting as lead architect for nearly 3 months. The results were exactly as I had predicted. The company had suffered 2 major system outages that disrupted service for our largest clients, costing us millions in service-level agreement penalties. A critical security vulnerability in the user authentication system had nearly exposed millions of client records, saved only by a quick-thinking senior engineer who bypassed Julian to fix it. To make matters worse, a botched product update had required an emergency rollback, causing widespread confusion. Under Julian's poor management, a growing list of talented engineers had submitted their resignations, refusing to work under someone who did not understand the technology he was supposed to lead. The board of directors was deeply concerned. The company's stock price had plummeted by 18%, erasing over $1 billion in shareholder value. Clients were asking uncomfortable questions about our technical stability, and Richard was desperately looking for scapegoats to protect his son. He needed someone to blame, but the data pointed directly at the new leadership. It was in this chaotic environment that Julian appeared at my office doorway, holding his coffee cup and trying to look in control. He had been asking for a meeting for weeks, but I had avoided him, waiting for the right moment. The encryption architecture was the one system he could not access without my unique security authorization. It controlled the security keys for every client database on the platform. Without those keys, Julian could not pretend to be the lead architect. He could not perform the updates the board was demanding. With them, he could claim complete control and finally lock me out. I looked up from my screen, staring at the young man who thought he could inherit my life's work. "Julian," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Are you ready to hand over the encryption keys?" he asked, trying to summon his usual smirk. The next morning, he smirked and asked, "Ready to hand over the encryption keys?" I smirked back and said, "No, I am here to initiate the kill switch." The extraction process took 37 seconds. It was not a destructive removal, not yet, but a comprehensive identification, tagging, and isolation of every line of code I had authored. The progress bar crawled across my monitor, and when it finished, the system display showed the massive scope of my work in glowing green text. 64 million lines of proprietary code, tagged and ready for immediate license revocation. 74.5% of the total codebase, 100% of the core architecture. Julian stared at the screen, his face turning pale as he realized the gravity of what he saw. "What is this?" he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the display. "This is my life's work, Julian," I replied. "Every algorithm, every security protocol, and every piece of foundational architecture that makes Vertex Neural Systems function. You cannot do this. This is company property." "No, it is my property, licensed to the company. A license I am prepared to revoke immediately." I stood up from my desk. "Go get your father." Now, Richard Harrington arrived in my office in 11 minutes. He had clearly been pulled from an urgent board call. His face flushed and his tie loosened. "Nicholas, what the hell are you doing?" he roared, slamming the door behind him. I gestured toward the screen. "I am reading our original partnership agreement, Richard, the one you should have reviewed before you decided to demote me and promote your son. That agreement is 14 years old and completely outdated," Richard insisted. "Evelyn Cole disagrees," I said calmly. "She reviewed the documents last night. The partnership agreement was never superseded. Section 12 is still legally binding. All proprietary code remains my intellectual property. The license is fully revocable upon the material diminution of my role." Richard's face went from angry red to a dull gray. "You cannot seriously be planning to pull the code. We are a public company, Nicholas. You would destroy us." "I will," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "unless we renegotiate the terms of our partnership." "Renegotiate what?" Richard asked, his voice cracking slightly. I handed him a manila folder from my desk. "My new terms." Richard opened the folder and read the document slowly. His hands began to tremble by the 3rd page. "This is madness. You want control of the entire company. I want what I built, Richard. No more, no less. I am demanding 55.5% ownership of Vertex Neural Systems. The board will never approve this. The board will approve whatever prevents a $7,500,000,000 company from becoming a worthless shell overnight. Go ahead and explain to them what happens when I revoke my license. Explain how long it would take to rebuild our core architecture from scratch. Explain that it is computationally impossible to replicate my adaptive neural pathways without the original NOVA framework. Richard looked at Julian. "And my son?" Richard asked. Julian returns to a role appropriate for his actual skills. A junior developer under structured mentorship. Someone who can teach him what he should have learned before you handed him a title he did not earn. Julian sputtered, but I raised a hand to silence him. "These terms are not a punishment, Richard. They are a correction. You tried to erase me. I am simply restoring the proper order. And if I refuse?" Richard asked, his voice barely a whisper. I reached for the keyboard. "Then I press this key, initiate full extraction, and send a formal 90-day revocation notice to the board and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Your platform becomes non-functional. Your stock becomes worthless, and you spend the next decade in court while I license my technology to your competitors." Richard stared at me. For the first time in 14 years, I saw real respect in his eyes. He realized I held all the cards. "I need to speak with the board," he said. I nodded. "You have 24 hours. The board approved my terms in 16 hours. The legal risk was simply too high." The restructuring was announced 3 weeks later. Nicholas Vance, founder and chief technology officer, assumed the role of executive chairman with a majority ownership stake of 55.5%. Richard Harrington transitioned to a non-executive board advisor with a minority stake of 15.5%. Julian Harrington was reassigned to the engineering development program as an entry-level programmer. 18 months have passed since that day. Vertex Neural Systems is thriving. Our revenue has grown by 37%, and we have filed 58 new patents, all built on the foundation I created in my garage 15 years ago. Julian completed the development program and recently earned a promotion to a legitimate junior architect position. He is not brilliant, but he is competent now, and more importantly, he is humble. We even had coffee last month, and he apologized for his past arrogance. Richard resigned from the board 6 months ago and retired. We do not speak, and we probably never will. I kept a screenshot of the extraction system from those 90 days of preparation. It is framed in my office now, showing 64 million lines of code ready for reclamation. It is a reminder that the work we do belongs to us, and sometimes you have to be willing to burn it all down to prove what you are worth. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever had your work claimed by others, drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. Hit that subscribe button and smash the like button. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.